Welcome back, guys, and today we're looking at digital media convergence, lesson 16, with a focus on media, audiences, and digital media convergence. Quick recap of lesson 15. Can you recall any key tips and tricks that we learned during the last lesson on how to identify fake news and what it is that you can do about it? Obviously, during the lesson, we'll open up the floor to class discussion for this, but that is something good to just note down for future reference. Okay, looking at lesson 16's objectives. We're going to discuss the media audience as a product, consumer, and producer. Critically explain how media audiences, users, consumers have changed due to digital media technologies. Understand and discuss news consumption across multiple media platforms. Critically explain changes in television and radio audiences. We have touched on that. We will be discussing that further this week. And then develop a critical understanding of the new media audience, user, consumer in digitally converged industries, and then show a critical understanding of the changing role of the consumer in journalism, television, and radio. Okay, moving straight into the lesson. The audience as product, consumer, and producer in the contemporary media marketplace. The role of the audience has been expanded due to new media digital technologies. The audience can now be a product, consumer, and a producer. So we're going to go through how you can be a product as an audience. I'm sure you're all very much aware on how you are a consumer. You consume media on platforms, and you can also create your own content, be it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But we will be touching on all three of these and discussing them in depth. Okay, so a quick introduction. One of the most distinctive characteristics of the media marketplace is the role and function of the audience. Obviously, a marketplace implies buying and selling, etc., advertising. So you can think about maybe Facebook marketplace or anything like that. In the dual product marketplace that characterizes media in which content is sold or it is given. So when it's sold, it means that you're subscribing, you're paying for it, or it's given, like Instagram. It's free, you don't need to pay or subscribe to someone's page, you simply follow them. To the audiences, and the audiences are in turn sold to advertisers. Audience occupy the unique position of being the consumer in one market and the product in another market. Okay, so again, that's quite interesting to see how, due to convergence and the advancement of media content online, we can consume it, and we have essentially become the product for larger advertising industries and campaigns, etc. So today, the audience as consumer/product dynamic is being further complicated by the ways that digital interactive media are increasingly providing audiences with the opportunity to also serve as content producers, capable of making and distributing content that can be of significant value to other media consumers and, of course, to advertisers. So here you can think about paid adverts on Instagram, sponsorships where people advertise on Instagram and things like that. People that are brand ambassadors associated with certain brands. That's kind of the idea that you can think of over here, and how we are able to create content for them. It's very much free marketing for them, so that's quite interesting. Okay, so looking at the first topic, we've just gone over the introduction, the audience as a product. Okay. So obviously this one will be quite in-depth or quite new to you. The sale of audiences to advertisers. The transaction involves selling the attention of potential customers to advertisers. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So firstly, we can look at how on the radio or on television, you will pay more to have your advert aired during prime time than what it is during like the middle of the day when people are at work and they're not necessarily watching TV. This is due to the fact that you're then reaching more people will be viewing it, etc. And you are then almost a product because they are paying more for that spot in the hope of you seeing it. Okay. So when focusing on social media, we can look at pages or websites like Twitter that has migrated to a business model that is increasingly dependent on advertising revenues. This, for example, obviously maybe you're scrolling through Twitter or you'll see it on multiple platforms and there's advertisements that are in between things, or that are linked to certain posts, etc. And we, although maybe we don't take note of it, we actually do still see that and consume that content. Okay. Then looking at Facebook, they engage in significant reconfigurations in terms of how they sell their audience's attention to advertisers. So here we can again look at maybe their algorithms and things like that, and how they will then keep track of what it is that we're viewing. They can, to an extent, sell that information to advertising industries and be like, well, these people are interested in this or that. If you buy this space, then obviously our algorithm will push your advert towards them because they're really interested in that kind of thing. Okay. All right. Why are certain demographic groups worth more than others? So I've already discussed this shortly. So we're going to look at more in depth. Historically, certain demographic groups served as the best available, meaning that they were more likely to purchase, etc. They were the most successful. Advertisers also presumably care about the most, which is audiences, product purchasing preferences, and behaviors. So if you are more likely to do online shopping after seeing something on the internet, on a social media platform, that is extremely important to advertisers. Okay. And then the consumption of these audiences are more likely to spend money on the products being advertised for reasons ranging. So they have disposable income, meaning they have their own income, they're able to spend it as they would like. They are more susceptible to advertisements, which is quite interesting. And they also lack brand loyalty. So they will view something that they like on the internet and they will go and purchase it. They might not be loyal to a certain boutique or to local stores or companies, etc. So that's extremely important for advertisers. Okay, then we can't discuss the audience as a product without discussing the audience measurement. So audience measurement systems are the means by which a product as tangible as human attention is made tangible. Okay, so basically you can't hold someone's attention, you can't, it's a almost somewhat of an abstract thing because you can't see it, etc. So they make this tangible by doing research and audience measurement. So this is viewed as sample-based audience measurement. It's extremely popular. This is usually when they get a sample group. They see how these people interact with things. Do you like this product? Don't you like this? Would you like this? Would you suggest we put any changes onto this, etc., etc.? But obviously, with technology moving forward today, more interactive technologies have contributed to moving away from these traditional sample-based processes, although they are still extremely popular today because they are, I dare to say, reliable, but it is just well trialed and tested, etc. Okay, moving on to the second topic for this, we are looking at the audience as consumers. So the audience's behavioral pattern as consumers factor directly into how they can be packaged and sold to advertisers. Okay, so media organizations seek to capture revenue directly from their audience members. Okay, so obviously when we view the advert or whatever it is, they want us to go out and spend money on it. So let's look at Netflix or anything like that. They want you to subscribe. So the increased availability of free content via legal and illegal channels, the audience are seen as less willing to pay for content, which is quite interesting. I'm sure you're all very familiar with streaming sites where you don't need to pay, or, DSTV had a loophole at one point with regards to their online logins and things like that. And people, although that wasn't illegal because the service was still paid for, it was just a loophole that was found. So should we make all content free? This is obviously what content creators are stuck with. But they have come up with somewhat of a solution, and I do think that it's an extremely successful solution, looking at how many of us still consume content from these platforms. So platforms like ESPN.com and Hulu make the bulk of their content available for free, but withhold higher value premium content for those willing to pay for a subscription. Disney has also somewhat employed something similar to this, where you're able to log in and you can see everything that they have, but when you click on it, you can't view it. So it acts as a teaser for us as an audience. ESPN and Hulu have obviously taken it a step further by making actual free content for their consumers. But then, there's that show that everyone's talking about and you really want to watch it, but you have to pay the subscription fee and you land up doing it. So this is referred to as the freemium strategy for pricing access to content is increasingly common and depends on an accurate assessment of how audiences value different types of content. Okay, so that's extremely important. It is a great strategy if you know exactly what content audiences will be willing to pay for, and that is what you will then withhold from the free platform. But, of course, audiences are extremely unpredictable, and we also have multiple different ways to access content without having to actually pay for it. So they need to be extremely strategic in ensuring that whatever it is that they are sharing and what they are hiding is the right decision. It doesn't help, for example, if they are sharing their most talked about show for free. It doesn't really help them because then no one's going to land up to pay for content that we don't actively want to see and view. Okay, so down at the bottom, again, there's a big but. Strategic differences can be undermined all too easily by the ways in which pirated content often circulates freely online. Again, this is quite important. Pirated content, the biggest put off of pirated content is generally, first of all, the issue that it is pirated, it's illegal. Secondly, it can be quality, the risk of getting a virus or anything like that, etc. That is probably one of the biggest put-offs of consuming pirated content, those that I've listed, but this still creates quite a challenge for legit content distributors and creators like Hulu, Netflix, HBO, etc., whose content is being shared illegally. So how will they get paid for content? So again, they've already introduced the freemium strategy, which was again quite interesting and very good, but just needs to be extremely accurate. and I think it can be very much a hit and a miss kind of situation. So early research examined issues such as consumer satisfaction with various media products. So over time, the study of media consumers has come to focus on understanding how consumers choose various media products. So this is kind of how you can start to tailor your product to get people to pay, make it what they want. So the program choice literature has delved into factors that impact consumer choices. And the findings of this included, firstly, the audience factors, which is the characteristics of media consumers, their taste, their preferences, and their awareness of various content options. And then the second one is media factors. This is the quality of content options, the range of media consumption technologies available. So in the first one, we can look at, obviously, maybe you really like horror movies and they've got really good horror movies on Netflix, and you could go there. And then also awareness of various content options. Are they actually aware that there's more than one streaming service, etc.? These are the kinds of things that they are looking at and how to ensure that they get paid. And then looking at media factors, quality of content options, that can be directly linked to budgets of movies and production, and then the range of media consumption technologies available. Can I watch it on my laptop? Can I watch it on my TV? Can I download some of it onto my phone, etc., etc.? Or am I bound to the TV with the cable in the wall? Okay, moving on with the research. Research has addressed questions such as the extent in which media consumers' individual genre or format preferences drive media consumption. I think that's quite important. It's extremely frustrating to look at a platform that isn't formatted friendly, it isn't user friendly, etc. It doesn't introduce you to more content and things like that. It's extremely boring, if I can put it like that. So that's quite important. The second one was how content selection is impacted by changes in the technological environment. Okay, so obviously content selection is impacted by changes. So our content selection has definitely changed in recent years, looking purely at the fact that we have so much more content to consume due to the technological environment, due to us being able to hop onto our computers and our phones and etc., our tablets, and consume whatever content it is that we'd like. So our content selection is definitely more niche orientated now than ever. Think back to a time where you were watching just standard cable TV. On Mondays, show A, Tuesdays, show B, Wednesdays, show C. And people consumed it and watched it because, to be frank, there was nothing else to consume and watch. Okay, and it was seen as probably, let's say, the best show on TV that night. And people would then reluctantly consume it. Whereas now, we aren't restricted in that aspect. So we will then consume the content that we want. Again, going back to maybe you like horror movies. So you're only going to consume horror movies on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, etc. Okay. And then the third one is the extent to which media consumers exhibit passive versus active tendencies in their media consumption behaviors. So again, are they actively looking for the content that they want to consume, or do they passively consume the content? So actively looking for the content, you can see with people who are subscribed to multiple different platforms, etc., like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, etc. They tend to be more content driven. They want to see what they want to see. Whereas you get passive users, this can relate to people who just have TV or cable TV. They're quite passive about it. There's only so far that you can search. And then also maybe you can look at people who only have Netflix. Maybe they finished Netflix at some point and they just continue to then consume Netflix, even though they've seen it's not necessarily producing anything they want, but they're quite passive about it. Okay. So another important behavioral pattern among media consumers from a media management standpoint involves the one-way flows of media products. Okay, so the one-way flows of media products is quite important. We look at quite successful streaming platforms and what they have on their platforms. And you will then see that majority of the successful streaming platforms have either bought or created content that comes from high value production well-known producers, etc., etc. There's a lot of finance that goes into this. So even once it starts to trickle down and you move into streaming platforms like My Family Cinema, which isn't that common, it's quite new, it's quite small, they don't have a very large audience, you'll find that they are still streaming the larger platforms content, and the larger platforms are they streaming these high production value content, etc. So it trickles down. The niche consumption isn't necessarily creating the audience. It is still the one-way flow. Okay, so how will they predict consumption? So we've obviously been over the multiple questions they've looked into, how researchers looked into it, and also the dilemmas of the pirated content that we can consume. So how are they going to predict that if they release this, we will consume it? So although there's not really a foolproof way of doing this, again, they have included the demographics, looking at things like that for advertising of content. Now we're looking at the consumption of it. So media managers often conceptualize consumption as a two-stage process. So the first stage is about making the decision to consume content via a particular medium. Okay, so how is majority of their audience going to consume it, or is majority of this generation going to consume media? So they will look at, am I going to watch TV or am I going to go to the movies? Let's say those are your two options. They almost need to predict which one you're more likely to do. Then you're going to the second stage, and this is about the selection between individual content options, and this is highly unpredictable. Okay, so if we look at, we can maybe predict the majority of people will watch TV at home or they will stream it. Okay, movies aren't necessarily that popular anymore due to expense, lack of options, etc. Whereas at home we can watch whatever it is that we want, whether we're streaming it or we can consume cable television. Then the more challenging stage is obviously, what is it that we're going to watch? What channel are we going to watch on, let's say, TSTV that has like 300 channels? What movie are we going to stream? What series are we going to stream, etc.? So the second stage is extremely difficult, and it is then orientated on more past consumption and genre consumption. So this explains today's interest in the ever-growing amounts of data that can be gathered about audiences' media consumption processes, which is your digital footprint. So I'm sure you guys have noticed that there's recently been quite an uptake in true crime, documentaries, etc., etc. And as audiences, the more interested we became in it, the more it's being released. And this is due to obviously looking at what it is that we're already watching. What are people actually interested in already? And this can all be found out by our digital footprints. I'm sure you guys know the whole thing of your phone is listening to you. Because when you speak about something, then it pops up in adverts on your Instagram and things like that. Similar concept, looking at what it is that you're looking at, etc. What are you more likely to? Okay, so the topic that we're going to look at today is the audience as a producer. Okay, so this obviously means that we are creating our own content, or maybe we're collaborating. So today, in a media environment of increasing interactivity with which audiences' opportunities to engage in the production and distribution of user-generated content are increasing. Okay, so obviously user-generated content, we are average social media users, maybe you're an influencer and you are generating content, focusing on a specific audience, maybe advertising a specific product, things like that. So the audience can operate alongside traditional media companies as content producers. So here we can maybe look at Adidas or Nike or any kind of sponsorship. They still have their own marketing that they do, but they give free products to content creators, people who are viewed as influencers, and they can then advertise or distribute or whatever it is that they choose to do with their content that they've created, showing that. Also looking at quite the literal idea of them working alongside traditional and content producers. We can look at YouTube. So YouTube plays traditional intentionally produced content, media content alongside user-generated content. This can be viewed as the adverts that are seen before you're allowed to watch a video, things like that, and how you're kind of forced to view certain content and things like that. And it's also usually targeted towards people who are viewing that channel and things like that. Okay, so at the most basic level, the rise of user-generated content can be seen as both a threat and an opportunity for media organizations. So that's quite interesting. So obviously user-generated content, we can look at Facebook and YouTube. They facilitate this. They allow us to create this. We can also look at Instagram and TikTok. They are extremely reliant on us creating the content for their platforms. And this has proven to be powerful in attracting and retaining audiences' attention. And people want to continue consuming other people's content, whether it's someone that you know or a friend, or you want to continue creating content and having it consumed. And then there's substantial income potential for media companies that manage to effectively collect and package user-generated content for audience consumption. So again, they can collaborate with influencers and things like that, and to have them do all the producing and take the time out of it, these companies can then avoid spending money on production with traditional types of content, or even just creating their own content for their page. So that's definitely an advantage for large companies, having people who are influencers or your average Joe maybe, who are creating content online. So advertisers have in some instances relied upon consumers to generate advertisements for them. Okay, so again, that can then be viewed as maybe an influencer, and maybe it was done so well, they took the advert, or whatever the situation is. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Okay, and then looking at, can we trust user-generated content? However, advertisers tend to value media content produced by the audience less than professionally produced content. So, although they want people to talk about it online and things like that, they are still extremely wary of it. Advertisers are wary of the context in which their advertisements are likely to appear. So, obviously, if you are advertising something that's maybe more orientated towards adults, and then it kind of appears within a more young platform or anything like that. Also, how is their product being used? Is it being advertised with the history and the mindset of the company and what the company is trying to communicate with the consumers? Is that there, or is it taking away from the product, or is it putting the product in somewhat of an awkward light? Okay. Other issues include issues of revenue sharing. Do you get I do understand that a lot of companies now have discount codes, and then whatever discount the person gets on the product, you then get that. So if you get 10% discount on a product by using someone's code, the influencer whose codes it is, they then get that 10%, whatever the story is, that kind of thing. But there is still a lot of issues around revenue sharing. And then liability. If you've advertised a product, let's say it's a lip gloss as being hypoallergenic, and you're a big YouTube star, people consume your content, they go out and they buy this because you're using it, so you say, oh, it's hypoallergenic, I'm allergic to everything, and then this individual has an allergic reaction. And who will they then blame? Will they then blame the YouTuber who is sponsored by that company, or will they blame the company? Where does liability lie? Who is then held responsible for misinformation or products being used incorrectly? And then the dynamics surrounding audiences' long-term demand for opportunities to both produce and consume user-generated content in conjunction with traditional media content. So that's also quite important. Will people continue to consume this person's content? Will they continue to produce content? So it's quite a unstable agreement in that aspect. Okay, and the fourth topic that we're going to look at today is news consumption, the audience and the consumer. So a little short introduction. The growing popularity of digital media and news and the sharp decline in traditional media have led the media industry to speculate that new media would eventually replace traditional sources of news and information. So again, we can look at how people are consuming their media. Are you searching it online? Or are you waiting for the news to come up at 6 o'clock in the morning and then again in the evening, etc.? Are you still listening to the radio or anything like that? So this trend of media convergence poses a challenge to existing theoretical frameworks. Obviously, this is within research. Arguments contend that a new media with similar functions emerge. They either supplant or supplement the use of existing media. So basically, this means that they don't, if a news platform that's on TV, let's take CNN, they have their consumers on television and they also have a website. But for them, they're indicating that the website is not going to take away from our viewers. Obviously, this is one of the opinions, one of the viewpoints on this. Some people assume that it's going to replace TV viewers. Some people think that it is just a supplement. So, I mean, it adds value to them, or it will never surpass their primary television, their primary way of communicating. Okay, so again, focusing on media convergence and media choice. So technology has changed the media landscape by offering more media and content options and by allowing for higher mobility and control over content selection in the hands of the user. So this means that nowadays a handful of media conglomerates dominate all sectors of media industry and rely on cross-media strategies, resulting in concentration on media marketing. So what this means is that because we're able to access information, news, content on so many different platforms, be it on radio, television, podcasts, our laptops, apps, websites, social media platforms, etc., etc. The conglomerates, meaning that our large media producers and distributors are now having to diversify. They can no longer just be on the newspaper or just on the TV. They're having to go across media, which means they need to have a website, they need to have an app, they need to continue on a television, they need to do this, they need to do that, they need to start including podcasts or anything like that. Okay. And then technological developments have forced changes in the organization and practices of new production and distribution. Okay. So again, just as I've explained, they are now having to look at different ways to not only produce but also to distribute their news due to technology. So here we can see the growing trends in citizen journalism, specifically on published news blogs and sites, written news items, etc. So this can be viewed as, they can have it on Twitter, social media, etc., or they can actually have their own independent website or blog. Citizen journalism both interacts with and challenges traditional news industry, which is quite interesting. Again, in that it can lay on responsibility, it can lay on who's trustworthy, etc., who is actually breaking the news and giving the information, etc. So gratification studies, this is a type of study approach that they've taken. The audience choose to consume the media content that best satisfy their social and psychological needs. So that is quite interesting, and that can also add to why citizen journalism is challenging traditional news industry. Maybe citizen journalism fulfills us more, could be more satisfactory for us. Maybe it aligns more within our beliefs or anything like that. And that is what we as a new age audience are after. We're after that gratification because we have so many options. We then get to pick and choose what it is that we like and what we don't like, what we want to consume, what we don't want to consume. So with traditional media, there was such a thing as agenda setting function. So mass media brings attention to important issues of the day, and consequently the general public forms a shared agenda of these issues. So let's look at, for example, recently the Queen of England has passed, and there are multiple ways that people had found out about this, whether it was on Instagram, whether it was on the radio, whether it was on television news, on the News 24 app, they were reading through a website on CNN or anything like that. It still set the agenda, and every single platform then began to speak about that specific thing. There is probably not one news platform or social media platform right now that does not include information or the news about the Queen's passing. Okay, so this is how there's a shared agenda. They aren't necessarily working with one another, the different platforms, the different media distributors or anything like that, but it is simply something that is important, and it has created an agenda setting. So focusing on agenda setting theory, it's formulated in a media environment where there were a limited number of media organizations that controlled content creation and distribution. So originally, agenda setting theory was brought about when we didn't necessarily have access to the internet for multiple sources and resources of consuming media and the news. It was very much focused on newspaper, TV, and radio. And of course, again, they discussed all the same things. So we were only able to consume the content to the extent that they allowed us to. So as media abundance and decentralization, so abundance means there's an overflow, the decentralization means that there's no longer only 4 content or media distributors that are distributing the news. There's now millions and millions and millions. Okay. So they pose a threat to traditional news institutions. They may question whether the agenda setting function of the media may still be justifiable in the new media environment. It would be quite interesting to hear your guys' opinion on this. Do you think that due to the abundance and decentralization of consumption and media online, that there's no longer that agenda setting? It would be quite interesting to see, specifically again with the issue and the topic of the Queen's passing recently, and yet it was on every single media platform. Although yes, that is a big thing, but maybe it has just reduced in in how often it happens. Not everyone's hearing the news about maybe a hit and run down the road, whereas in the past maybe that was agenda setting within your community, something like that. So evidence shows that intra-media agenda setting still exists in the new media environment. Overlapping news agendas are shared across multiple online sources and between online media and traditional media outlets. So again, using the example of the Queen, we saw it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, whatever other social media platform you can think of. It's going to be in the news. It was on TV, it was on the radio, it was shared across all of them. So audiences, in fact, exercise different degrees of selectivity in consuming news. So some people would want to then listen to it on the radio, TV, etc., and they want to consume as much of this content as possible about, let's say, again, for example, the Queen's passing. Some people will simply see it on social media and move forward. Okay, so for instance, some news audiences actively attend to only a few specific topics. Okay, these are people that focus purely on, maybe you only want to read about crime in the news and on the internet. Okay, so you only focus on a few topics. And then B, there are many browsers. There are many that browse a range of new topics presented to them by the platform. So consequently, the second group, which is B of audience, may still be subject to news media converging agendas. I think, majority of us are, especially with regards to social media, because we do not necessarily choose what we view to an extent. We choose to follow certain pages. But if that page posts something that is on a different topic, we then automatically view it. If you understand what I mean. We can choose who we follow, but we can't decide or choose what it is that they're sharing. So if we've chosen to follow someone and they shared something about a topic that we're not necessarily interested in, we're still going to end up consuming it to an extent, whether it's we view it on their post and we scroll past it, or we'll end up clicking on the link to read further. And the fifth topic for today is the radio audiences. So radio, as other media, has become a regular feature for everyday life while we spend time consuming media in digital platforms. So changes in media consumption have led us to a listener who integrates audio listening from FM broadcasting and online streamings, and the user, the person who interacts in social media networks and explores radio websites. They actively They engage actively by producing and sharing content in the social context, etc., etc. So people that take advantage or combine the two of these, they are viewed as e-listeners. So radio no longer has listeners, but online and new form of listeners, which are named your e-listeners. So again, we did touch on this in another lesson. We're just going to touch on it again this week. So e-listeners are FM listeners and online listeners. Okay, so they are the combination of the two. So we're going to look at the factors that of only online listeners right now. So online listeners primarily use internet-based technologies. They're relatively expert with technology. They're intensive web users, active members on social media, and they are keen into music, meaning they have extremely niche music. So this is just kind of like a general profile of your online listeners, which I think we can all agree is more likely to relate to younger generations, specifically looking at expert with technology, the children of the baby boomers down. And then looking at specifically the FM listener. They also can be listening to the radio online. They aren't necessarily restricted to FM airways. They're mostly a follower of technology. They are convenience web users. They'll use the web when it's convenient. They won't actively attempt to do so. They listen to online radio for comfort. They follow online the radio station that they listen to in FM. So let's say they listen to 5FM in their car. They're more likely to stream 5FM on their laptop at work too. So they do take part in social networks, but they rarely update their photo. They are viewed as lazy searchers, and they don't necessarily have enough time or skill to explore the web. So again, moving on with e-listeners, the combining of these two categories, we can give an account of the e-listener. So the first is an important feature regarding the e-listener is that they combine radio and other forms of audio media in multiple platforms to settle their own audio media digest. So that means that they will use the radio, they will use podcasts, they will use online radio, etc., to satisfy their need to consume radio in this manner. And then we get cross-media and multimedia platform media consumers. They display interactive practices while interacting with media and producing content. And the final topic for this lesson is TV consumers. So here's an article called The 5 Ways Watching TV Has Changed Over the Past Decade. This is an activity for the students. The following slides is a summary of the article. I want to encourage you to allow the students to read through it, and then they will discuss it afterwards. So let students work through the following summary and discuss/highlight the changes that digital media convergence has had on TV audiences. Okay, so we're quickly going to look at the summary. I won't read through all of them. Obviously, it's something that you guys will need to do as it's a class. So again, here's just a quick little summary of it. I've tried to keep it short and sweet for you, just to highlight the things that I thought was important. Alright, so obviously once you've gone through all of the summary that I've just clicked through, you'll then refer back to the previous slides and you will discuss and highlight. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the lesson, and here is your usual next lesson teaser. For your next lesson, you will do research on website software, in particular applications of website building. You'll do research on social media platforms and particular applications for use in journalism, and then develop a critical understanding of the various online and social media tools and platforms, when to use which tool/platform, and how to best use each tool/platform. So here I've highlighted all of my references that I've used for this lesson. If you want to read the full article, here's the link for the 5 ways watching TV has changed over the past decade. I actually do encourage you to go and read the full article. It's extremely interesting and very enlightening. So yeah, and I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and please remember to contact your lecturers if you guys have any questions.